rolling into it. But anyways, Tim,
Nice.
let's talk about the windy conditions. This one's been a minute in the making because it has been one hell of a windy fishing season
It has
since
been.
open water fishing season here in Minnesota. I mean, dude.
Yeah. Even not, dude. I remember like trying to put the ice house down and just like every time going out there, just being like, well, I remember last year I didn't have to use the anchors at all.
Okay.
And this year I'm like, well, if I don't put the anchors down, my house is going to blow away. So,
So you're saying like 2022, windy fucking season.
yeah, so far it's been crazy.
Also, I hope the podcast sounds a little bit better because I got a new windscreen.
Mm.
For the mic. Support us on Real AF TV's Patreon. That's realaf.tv/Patreon. So we can keep getting things like this. Yeah, because I was listening back to myself and I was like, man, my P's are hitting too hard. My P's and my T's are hitting too hard. And so I hope that part's not annoying and I hope it sounds better.
I never really noticed it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe do I say a lot of P's and T's?
No, it's not that I say it a lot. It's just that I catch it. So I just felt the need. So I got a new one. Plus my daughter's been figuring out the mic now and she just grabs it and drools on it. And I was like, well, all the more reason to get a new one and get an upgrade.
Yep. Now I need a new one.
So Tim, windy fishing conditions. I'd like to kick it off with a poem.
All right.
Wind from the east, fish bite the least. Wind from the west, the fish bite the best. Wind from the north, few sailors set forth. Wind from the south blows bait in their mouth.
Whoa.
Yeah, I found that and they were like, I don't know, I've heard this like a million different ways.
I have heard the west and the east thing a million times. I have never heard north and south. That was the first. That's why I was like, huh? You're still going? I thought it was over at west.
Yes. Yes. I found that on like the Boy Scout of America's one, like website or something, I swear. I didn't write it down because it basically said like, I didn't write that. I've heard like a million different versions of this. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to start that way and be like, okay, so 2022 has been windy. Yeah, we established that. It sucks. It's been rough. So let's do this topic. What the hell truth is there in any of what was just said?
Well, so I think a lot of it has to do with like weather patterns and stuff. I've never really thought of like the south and the north and stuff, but like a cold front, I feel like a lot of times comes from like a north wind. So it'll shut shit down on a cold front and stuff. But after a cold front is one of my favorite ways to fish. I like finesse fishing. I like slowing it down and just working like a weightless fluke and stuff. So I think it all depends on the person and how they fish. You know, sometimes if you have to slow down and you don't get a chance, like it does make them less active. You know, if there's no wind, no ripples or nothing, you know, depending on the fish you're talking about, on a no wind day, it can definitely make it harder to catch walleyes and stuff. So depending on like your fish that you're trying for, it can definitely make it harder. But bass, I think it makes it harder too, but I think it's fun. I think it's fun fishing like that. But the east and the west, I think for the most part, I think a lot of times it's like a west southwest wind. And when it's coming from the east, it like sets up things on a different pattern. So I think a lot of times people are like used to fishing where the winds are coming from the west, and it'll kind of set up where the fish are because the windy side of the lake is the more productive side of the lake.
Yeah.
And when you switch it, all of a sudden their spots aren't as productive as they once were, and it moves stuff around. And, you know, all of a sudden your patterns change.
Oh, so if you were to say, like, to kind of say, relate back to this, whatever proverb or whatever, I don't know what the fuck you want to call it, but if it's hot on the west side of the lake because the wind from the west, fish bite the best, right? Okay, so whatever. Wind from the west, fish bite the best. You're doing great. Wind from the east, fish bite the least. Like it's just it's the opposite because you were catching them on the west wind and now it's shifted to an east wind and you're still fishing the same way. You don't get shit.
Right. Yeah, you got to change it up. Yeah, if you keep fishing the same way, things are probably not going to be that good. So, yeah, I mean
Yeah.
there's some truth to it, but it's also like it just rhymes. When I was younger,
Right. Mm-hmm.
I like took it to heart where nobody told me about it. I just heard the rhyme.
Okay.
And I'd like wake up in the morning and look and I'd be like, and the wind is blowing and then that's the east. Oh no. You're gonna get stingies from the east. And then you go to fish and you'd still catch fish and you'd be like, oh, I really didn't think we were gonna catch anything today. Or like, like one of those little kid moments
Yeah.
where you just sound like an idiot. Dad,
Yeah.
can you believe that we caught fish today? The wind was from the east. I just
Right.
oh, can't even. And then your dad's just like, it's just a fucking rhyme.
You're like, it doesn't mean the fish won't bite. It just means you have to fish it different.
Yeah.
But,
And my dad's not even that kind of fisherman. He's just like, because back in the day, it was just like bobber fishing,
mm-hmm.
So honestly, on his days, like where if he's fishing the same spot that was wind blown, and now it's the other side, and he's just fishing with a bobber.
Mm-hmm.
When you bobber fish and slow things down, you excel most of the time in like no wind conditions. So things probably
Mm-hmm.
always went well for him because he's always looking. He's that kind of guy not trying to fish the windy side of the lake. He's
Right.
also the kind of guy that when the wind is blowing at like 7 miles an hour, he's like, oh, I know it's supposed to be 20-mile-an-hour winds today,
He just loves the glassy water so much that 7-mile-an-hour wind just sets him off.
Yeah, just mad. Or like the wind's like barely blowing at the dock and he's just like coming straight at us. We can't get the boat off the dock even. You're like, you can. So
you can.
Yeah, you for sure can. I mean, we're gonna. I didn't come up here to not go out on the boat because there's a little bit of wind coming at the dock.
Right.
If there's whitecaps coming at the dock, whatever, you got a point. I'm not,
Right.
it's not
right.
my boat to try to take off. And if we screw up and your boat hits the dock, I get you're not going to be happy about that. So fine. But this 7-mile-an-hour wind is going to be just fine.
You're gonna be okay.
We're going to be all right. I promise.
So the this week the Bass Elites are fishing St. Lawrence.
Yeah.
And it has been fucking gnarly out there, dude.
With the winds and stuff?
Yeah. So I was like,
Dude.
oh my God, we have to talk about this during this. Like, it just so happens we put this on the dock a couple weeks ago, and it just so happens that the Elites are fishing at the week we're talking about fishing.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Dude, I think it was Chris. Is it Zeldane? I think it's Zeldane is how you say his name.
Okay.
I always screw it up because I want to say a hockey player's name, and that's just me mixing up sports.
Oh,
so,
dude, I
sorry.
get it.
Yeah.
No,
so,
just
sorry,
word
Chris.
association. Totally get it. There's like, what if it's close to what you know? That's what's coming out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
He had water in his boat driving back from practice.
I know, dude. That's the part that makes me
of water
most. Yeah, that's the part that makes me most nervous about getting a bass boat. Is like I see him out there trying to like drive kind of into the wind, and your trolling motor, your foot pedals like set into the floor.
Right.
And they're driving, and every wave is like coming up over, and they're like stepping back, trying not to get their feet wet and stuff. And I'm like, oh man, like a bass boat would be so sick, but I'm so uncomfortable with just water constantly coming over the front of my boat.
Yeah.
Dude, do not.
That freaks me out.
Yeah, dude, it would give me such anxiety.
Big time.
You're out like Lake Erie. You're out on like,
right.
oh, we're like in, 120 feet of water. That's not where they're fishing, but like we're driving over 120 feet of water and water's coming over the front of the boat.
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, but it's okay. I got to drive to the other side. We're going to fish over there.
Right.
Just like, I don't know, man. It's okay.
Ugh.
Yeah, it gives me anxieties. Like, I really would like a bass boat, but that just, I don't even like watching it.
Yeah.
Being in the boat myself, I know that they float even when they take in water and stuff, but I've also
Right.
seen videos of guys like with the big motor going,
Mm-hmm.
trying to like plane out because there's way too much water in their boat and they feel like they're gonna sink, and the guy's just like
Oh
talking to the
my.
other dude like, we're fine. Like, you do not look fine. I'd be freaking the fuck out, man.
And when these guys are on the front of the boat, dude, they're like, it's like they're working out, dude. They are working their
Oh
muscles to
yeah.
stay balanced. They are up
Uh-huh.
and down with the boats, and they have to like the trolling motors are I saw this literally in my research because I have to look this stuff up because I don't know what's going on. Like the trolling motors are coming out of the water and it's sucking air, and I'm like, what?
Oh
That's
yeah,
what it
dude.
said. It said like in my research, it's like trolling motors are sucking air, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm seeing that because these
Yeah.
these guys are going up so high, and then you see them drop down to the well, and it's like, holy shit!
Yeah.
Like,
You
what does
can
that
hear.
mean? What does the sucking air mean?
I think it basically just becomes like a fan at that point. It doesn't really suck air, but you can
Gotcha.
hear it. Like I've done it before. Like you have it and you
Mhm.
hit a wave and it's going, so you don't hear the trolling motor, and as soon as it comes out, you hear it kind of like spool up and then chop the water as it's coming in. So it's like you're hitting the waves, so it's like a and
Yeah. Yep.
it sounds crazy.
Because yeah, I bet it does. That fan blade going into the water. Holy
Yeah.
shit. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I think, that's what they're talking about, unless they have some sort of a, I don't know. I don't have a new age trolling motor. I'm pretty sure they still all have the same
Yeah.
blades. I think it's just a
It's just a
figure
way
of
to put it.
speech, but
Yeah.
they're
Okay.
sucking air, bro. But yeah,
Right, right.
you know
I
what
I
else
read
is?
that there were, like, extenders and stuff like that you can get for your trolling motor for, like, 4 windy
Oh,
days. It's like, "What?"
well, you'd have to, yeah, windy days on like deep water like that, because you got to figure like if
Okay.
it's a 3 or 4 foot wave,
Right,
every time you're
right.
going to the peak and then coming back down, like the next, when you're on the peak of the wave, the
Mhm.
next wave is dipped. So
Yeah. Yep.
that space from where your trolling motor is to where the tip of the boat is you know
It's 3,
what,
4,
6
5
feet
feet.
if it's the
Oh.
if it's a 3 foot tall wave, the
Oh,
bottom, maybe, I
right.
don't
I
know,
get
that
what you're
math might
saying.
be off, but
No, no, I think that's right. Typically,
yeah.
that's what a wave is that the up peak is, and I forget the sine wave terms, but it's the crest is the same as the well. The top of the crest is the same as the well on the next one.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
some shit like that. So yeah, you'd be right. You're like
Yeah.
3 feet up, and the next thing down is 3 feet down. That'd be 6 feet in between you and the next bottom.
No.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and then
That's crazy to
that
think
makes
about.
sense that they have the extenders and stuff, but I've never really thought about it. But one thing I have thought about is how they have, a lot of them have a transducer like built into the trolling motor now.
Okay.
And every time that comes out of the water, you're losing your graph.
Oh,
It'll keep going back, but you'll just have like these dead spaces on your graph, because it kind of like scrolls. So you'll just have like bing, 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 bing. It's still
and you're
wet,
talking
so
about
maybe
on
it's,
a fish finder, right? Like,
yeah. So like a fish finder, the transducer has to have that water because it's basically like shooting sound waves down, and then the sound waves bounce off and comes back up, and that's what
mm,
makes your picture. Every single time that transducer's coming out of the water, the sound waves aren't traveling through the water because you're not in the water anymore, so you're
right,
losing it, and it's
right, right.
making it. And
So
at
you
the
just
very
get a big
least, even
black
if you're,
bar probably, right?
yeah, and even if you're not, it's shooting down to the bottom, so
Mm.
everything that you get is like this wave. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know if
Oh,
the new age ones have something
to combat that
where
or
you can
something.
be like, yeah, because they know how fast you're traveling or whatever, that can kind of do the math and
Mm.
calculate it, like shift it every shoot, shoot,
Oh, I
to
gotcha, I
make it
gotcha.
level out. I don't know.
Right, but either way,
You
it makes
think
it
with the
harder to read,
calculating
like, as far as
power,
you know, like,
yeah, for
reading
sure, for sure.
Damn, dude.
Does for sure. That was one of the things that I was gonna touch on, was some of the graphs are not gonna be working that well. I guess
Yeah.
we could just get into it since I'm already talking about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
But that's one thing,
Natural flow.
natural flow, where I had thought to myself, like, you gotta learn to walk before you can run. And there's some dudes out there now, not necessarily tournament fishermen. Tournament fishermen are tried and true for the most part. Like,
Sure.
they've been putting in work. So even though they're using these new electronics, like this, they didn't get here because they have the new electronics and that's it.
Right, right. Oh yeah,
But
for sure.
if you have people that are just getting into it and they went straight to this forward imaging, or like, like the live,
Yep.
all the different stuff, they call that forward imaging now, because at first they used to be like, oh, it's just this or whatever. And then everybody came out with one. So now it's forward imaging.
Oh,
So forward imaging is basically what's giving you like these live views of the fish and stuff. When you're
okay.
hitting those waves like that, you basically can't use that shit, because
Right. Okay.
you're moving all over the place. You're not getting an accurate
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
You're not seeing a fish like you are when it's not windy. You're just seeing something. You're like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. There's just something in front of me. So
It's not
it
the
could,
fish like in the demos that they show. It's not the fucking largemouth just swimming a little bit away and then
right.
hiding under that rock. It's way
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yep. So I was thinking in my head that, like, up until now, that's always been the case, is that you have to learn to walk before you can run.
Mhm.
Meaning, like, if you don't know the fundamentals, you're not going to go out there and be able to kill it every day. But that thing is
Right.
almost like a cheat code to be
Sure.
able to go out there and kill it,
Great way to put it.
you know? But
Yeah.
then these guys that only know how to do that on that day aren't going to be
Mhm.
able to do anything else.
Right.
So you're going to be going out there and they're just going to be like, oh, I can run all day. And then you're just like, not in this shit. And you're like, okay, get your thing. And then I just speed walking past you. I've been doing this the whole time. I've never had what you have.
Right,
it's,
right.
it's time to
And so
fish
here
this
I am.
wind.
That speed walk, my feet, I never run. My feet never each one, always
Nope.
touching the ground.
I'm going. Some days I run, but it's not because of that cheat code. But yeah, man, it definitely messes with some of the electronics and stuff. So you
Sure, of
really
course
kind of
it does.
you
I
gotta
would've never thought of that.
understand where you're at. Like, the electronics still come into play because your GPS is going to be putting you in a certain place, and
Mhm,
your speed,
mhm,
being able to see how fast you're going one way or another, can definitely help depending on how you're fishing. If you're fishing for walleye
mhm,
and you're trolling and you have the wind to your back,
mhm,
giving you some extra speed,
mhm.
the police are coming. We better
Oh.
hurry this up. You heard, I figured out what I've been doing.
Quick, 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 quick.
But so yeah, like, if you're trying to troll, like pull some crankbaits or pull some sort of a rig and you got the wind to your back, like, what you normally troll at is not going to be the same. You might just be hauling ass. You might not be able to troll at all that day, because
Yeah.
depending on the wind speeds, like, you might be going way too fast and have no chance, depending on
Oh,
what you're fishing for.
because you can kind of you're saying like, "Oh, I'm used to setting walleye troll at this setting."
Yeah.
Whatever,
Yep. Yep.
3. I'll just say 3 because I don't know what a trolling
Yeah.
motor.
No, that's
Yeah.
probably, yeah. Depending on what you're trying to pull, like, yeah, a 3 out of 10 is probably decent. And, if you're trying to pull a crankbait, you might be going balls out. But even like with a crankbait, you might be going way too fast,
Mm, mhm,
just because you might, depending on a windy day, if you're trying to pull something at like 2 miles an hour, 1.5 to 2 miles an hour or whatever,
mhm.
that wind might not let you do anything less than like 4.
Yeah, right.
So,
Because it'll like, it's gonna push you, right?
right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's been days where I've been moving 3 miles an hour with nothing, just drifting.
You can see that on the, uh, like, on your fish finder?
Yeah, the GPS, or the one
Oh, the
thing that I
GPS.
forgot that one time, the pan, No, I'm having to do. I'm word association. I was talking about the live scopes or the forward facing. So now I'm thinking Panoptics,
Right.
and now I'm trying to say Panasonic, and I know that's not the right thing.
Because you have a phone in your hand.
Yeah, so I'm just like
So you know that's not right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for freaking
But you're
fellow
trying to
filler. Yeah,
you're talking
but
about that, Maps app that you have on your phone? Is that what
yes,
you're saying? Yep.
yep. And why I'm still brain farting? I thought for sure Navionics.
Yep.
That's not Panasonic, but there's like all the same letters in there, so my
Right,
brain's
right.
just
It's
like,
very, very close if you just break down the sound. If you were to blur the sounds together, they'd be the same. So, yeah,
yeah,
you got Navionics on your phone.
yep. And that uses your GPS through your phone, so it knows how fast you're going. It'll show you your
Oh.
speed.
Oh,
Yeah,
sick.
like my
Okay.
dad, his depth finder on his boat doesn't have a GPS unit.
Mhm,
So I
mhm,
always use the Navionics app for my GPS. So I have like my phone and his
mm.
graph, and it's basically like a 2-in-1
Yeah. And
when I
so
set
then
them
you've
up next
seen
to
on
each other.
windy days where you guys have just been sitting
Yeah,
and
in like my
it's
old
pushed you.
boats, I have my little boat, I have the GPS, but yeah, definitely see like how fast you're moving, and
Damn.
you know, certain baits are
Right,
definitely you want to be in a certain zone.
right.
So the
And
wind
it's
can
something so
definitely
that's
throw
really
you
something to
off.
think about, like,
Yeah.
your speed,
Well,
your
right.
drift speed is something you need
Yeah.
to be taken into consideration big time
Boat
on a windy day.
boat control in general. You know, like
Mm.
the boat speed or where you're at and stuff,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
um just I mean it's a thing that's been said over and over and over by us, but planning ahead is huge,
You're right.
and definitely planning ahead in the wind for so many different things.
Right.
Like even um so boat control, like say that there's a point
Yep.
or a ledge or something that you're trying to fish, whatever the structure may be, you know that they're going to be either at the top of the break, which is like, there's like a flat, and then it at the top of the break is, like 9 feet, and then it drops off.
Okay.
So the top of the break is like before it starts, like right where it starts to go down.
Yep.
Maybe the fish are set up on the top of that break because the current's pushing everything in there, right?
Right.
So the wind creates current, and the current is pushing in the plankton, and the
Yep.
plankton are getting ate by the minnows, and the minnows are getting ate by the bigger fish, and the
Yep.
bigger fish are getting ate by even bigger fish. So, so
Yeah, yeah.
a
I think
lot of
my note because, of course, doing the research,
yeah,
I think it literally says, uh, "Yep," and it sets the food chain in motion.
yes,
Yeah,
for sure.
and the food chain goes nuts. That's literally my note.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like it can kind of set off like a feeding frenzy because
Oh,
everything's set
that's
up
a
in
good
like
way to put it, dude. That's like that hits when you say it set like the wind sets off a feeding frenzy. That hits.
mhm.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, not every time, but the wind is definitely your friend. Like
Right,
100% of the time, the windy side of the lake is the more productive side of the lake.
right. Yes.
Unless, I say 100% of the time. I'm sure there's an exception when it's like a hurricane or a tornado, but nobody's fishing in that shit, so that doesn't matter.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's 100% of 60% of the time it works every time,
Mhm. Exactly. Numbers, math, you get it. Uh, so, um, yeah, what were we talking about before?
Well, we were
Oh,
talking about
the
the
setting off the
the
food chain.
the yeah, the wind and how, like, the windy side because when it actually when the wind blows, there's less sun penetration, leads to more plankton, leads to plankton being pushed across the lake, and wherever the
Right.
wind is pushing the plankton, it sets off the food chain. Like, that's just
Yeah.
simple. That's just how it works.
Yeah, yeah. And the current a lot of times will set up even the way the fish are facing. For the most
Oh,
part,
shit.
when the
Really?
current's pushing everything this way or whatever, the
Mhm.
fish don't hightail it and swim with the current. They face the current because they're made to go that way. Like, so they're just kind of sitting facing
Wind
the
from the
current,
south
like
blows
waiting
bait
for
in their
stuff.
mouth.
Yeah, that's right. Blowing right. They're just waiting, open mouth, just waiting. They don't even have to do any work.
Crazy.
But
They just sit there, all even
there
predator fish, they just sitting there
there
waiting,
yeah,
obviously, like,
there are a lot of
sitting there.
times, like there are a lot of times moving around and stuff, but for the most part, like, when they're
Mhm,
sitting there, they're like, depending on what kind of fish you're talking about, like a muskie can
mhm,
kinda wait off of the current break, just waiting, if there's, like, some wind that's kinda pushing over this hump, he might be on the front side waiting, like, in the weeds, he might be, like, slightly off to the back. There have been times where so Lake Shamana has a island in it, and the island has 2 very defined points on both sides,
mhm,
and they drop off pretty fast on both
mm,
sides of these
okay,
points, like,
yeah,
on either side of the cat or on either side of the island, and the wind one day was coming directly across, like, pushing across this point,
mhm,
and I had my muskie rod out. And I was looking at this and I'm like, muskies are like the biggest, baddest creature in the water.
right,
He's going to set up in the most optimal spot. Nobody's going to tell him no. He's not worried about anybody else eating him. He's there
right,
waiting for something else to
yeah,
come along so he
yeah.
can eat it.
Tiger muskie's a name and a metaphor.
Right, right, right. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, if there's a fish here, he's right there. And if I pull it across there, he's at least going to get a chance to look at it.
Mhm,
And the exact cast where I thought he would be, I pull it across, and he hits the inline spinner, like the big Mepps, like muskie killer. I can't remember which one I was using.
mm.
They call him uh uh bucktail. I don't know.
Oh,
I couldn't think of that, but like a bucktail spinner is what they call it because they literally use buck like deer hair. The
oh.
deer hair like flows different in the water. There's a couple of different, like the bucktail has the deer hair. There's ones that use tinsel. There's another one that uses marabou feathers, which is some sort of a bird. I don't know, but
Okay, yeah,
they like
wow,
flow different in the water or whatever. But
mhm,
yeah, casted it like just was like this is where he'll be setting up, and he'll be facing this way because of the wind and everything. And I took that cast, and sure enough, like the fish was right where I thought he would be, and it was all
mm,
because of the wind. Like it had
mhm,
him set up in the exact spot, and that's
nice, nice,
like when you learn how the wind is pushing stuff and moving stuff,
yeah,
you can make those like educated guesses.
right,
He might not have been there 100% of the time, but when I
right,
said if there's one here, that's where he's going to be, that's exactly where he was.
yeah,
So,
and just
and it feels
knowing
so good
because.
when you're right about it.
Oh, I bet it did. I bet that felt fucking awesome,
Yeah,
and it
especially when
just.
you're telling other people if there's a fish here, it's going to be right here. Zoom. I told you. I told you.
I fucking told you. And that just came from the experience of what you said of, like, read the wind. Okay, so the wind is blowing the bait fish, we'll just say for ease of it's blowing
Yeah.
the bait fish this way. So if that's where the bait fish are getting blown because they can't help it, then I bet you there's a predator fish right there, and then wham!
Yep. Yep.
Fucking awesome,
And
dude.
it just makes them more active in general. You can get closer to fish without spooking them because
Yep.
when the water's clear, they can see you too. There was a
Yes.
diagram I saw once upon a time where it kind of shows you what they can see based off
Okay.
of where they are from. There's a certain angle where you can't see through the water anymore. They
Okay.
don't have polarized lenses. So when they're looking at a certain angle, the top of the water from their view looking up becomes like glass as well.
Right.
So when
Yep.
they're looking, they can't see you at a certain distance, but
Mhm.
the calmer the water, the farther that distance is.
Yeah. Yep.
So when there's all these wind and the ripples and stuff, and they can't really see. I mean, they might see you on the surface, but they're not really paying attention to it.
It just the wind like, causing those ripples in the surface is causing, their vision to be obscured, like, that
Yeah, yeah,
like, it's just obstruction of vision, right? Because it's all choppy and shit,
yeah.
and if it's clear, you can see through it. I mean.
It's even obstruction of light.
Oh, right,
The
yes,
way
that's a better way.
the way the water, well, what you said is right, but also like of light. It's
Right.
darker in the same waters to them
Right.
when
Right.
the wind is blowing, because it's
Right.
cutting it up. It's not letting the
It's just not
light
letting the
rays penetrate.
water it's not letting the water is, like, reflecting and refracting and reflecting, and it's doing it way more in way different ways than a flat pane of glass, so to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when they can't see you, and when the light's a little bit, like, lower, like, the low light conditions are when they're the most active. If it's low light all day because the wind is breaking them up, then they're active a lot of the part of the day, and if they can't see you, you're not spooking them, so you can get
Right.
closer to the fish. Like,
Right.
wind can definitely be a helper for you,
Right.
but it does bring challenges.
Sure, of
You know,
course.
there's a lot of baits that are gonna be a lot harder to use.
Oh,
Um, so, like, if you're fishing jigs and stuff, jigs for
okay.
walleyes, jigs for bass, whatever they are, you just gotta go heavier. You don't have a choice. If you're
Oh.
using stuff too light, if you're using, like, a 16th ounce jig,
Mhm.
it's never hitting the bottom. On a super windy day, it's just not gonna get
Oh,
down there.
you're talking about bouncing it off the bottom, like, getting it
Yeah.
down
Yep,
deep.
yep.
It's not
And
gonna make it.
right, and like an 1/8 inch jig, probably not either, but or 1/8 inch. If you're using a tiny
Ounce.
little thing, but an 1/8 ounce, like, just know that whatever you're trying to do, like, you
Mhm.
gotta go heavier. If you normally are fishing, if you like to use like an 1/8 ounce jig in like 15 feet of water, on that
Yeah.
day there's like 15-mile-an-hour wind, you gotta go up to like a 1/4 ounce at least,
Yeah. 'Cause it'll
maybe
never make it through
3/8.
that top layer of choppy ass water. Like, it's just
Well,
it won't even make it through right? The extra
Well,
current?
it'll make it through, but with the wind and the current and everything, it just makes it harder to do everything. You can't really feel the jig, you can't really feel the bottom, you don't really know where you're at.
Oh,
Like,
I
you gotta
gotcha.
have it because you're moving and it's moving and everything, like, with the waves, it just makes so
It's
much more movement
messing
that
with
you
your
have to.
line, your
Yeah,
feel, like,
exactly.
there's the feel is not there. Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Right. Yeah, so you gotta go
Mm,
heavier so you can feel everything. And it's
right,
the same
right.
with, like, bass jigs. Whatever you like to use, if it works, that you gotta go heavier. You just really don't have a choice. I know, like, real extreme currents, obviously, like, just a windy lake isn't the same as like a river, but some of the real strong rivers, those guys are using like all the way up to like a full ounce, maybe like an ounce and a half in some of those real strong current
Mm.
rivers.
Mhm.
I've never tried
Just
fishing with anything like that, but like,
but it's just
I've
a
seen the
feel,
pros do it. Yeah.
like, because you can't
Right.
otherwise
That
you got
current.
nothing, right?
Yeah.
You're just sitting there fighting the waves
Mm-hmm.
basically, huh?
Yep. Yep.
Hmm,
And
interesting.
and the way you are fishing, like, even in a river, this is just a good tip for a river, but
Mm,
like,
mhm.
when you're fishing current in a lake, depending on your depth, the current's not always that big of a deal in certain spots. Like,
Mm.
I shouldn't say in certain spots, in certain depths.
Oh, okay.
If the wind's really blowing and you're fishing like 20 feet down, the
Mhm.
water's not moving that much 20 feet down.
Right, right. It's that
It's
surface
definitely
level.
not moving the same as the surface. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
you need that weight to get down there and stuff, but it's not quite the same super deep. But depending on like the where you're fishing in the water column, like wherever you think the fish are,
Mhm.
pulling the bait with the current is what you want to be doing most of the time. Or maybe like sideways with the current, but pulling the bait against the current, way less fish almost every time, especially in a
Really?
river. Yeah, it's just like not natural. I
So
don't know.
basically if you're fishing upriver and casting downriver,
Yeah.
that ain't really probably gonna work out for you.
Right. Yeah, you gotta cast upriver and pull it downriver. So, like,
With the current?
pull it with the current.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll catch like 10 times the amount of fish.
Huh.
If it's a really light current, it might not be that big of a difference, but if the current's
Sure.
moving pretty decent, you can
Mhm.
feel it in your bait. If you're using like an inline
Oh.
spinner or like a crankbait, if you
Yeah.
cast it with the current
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then you bring it back in, you can feel your bait working normal.
Oh, yeah,
But
for
if you
sure.
cast it in like with the current and then pull it back against the current,
Yeah.
that crankbait is going overtime and your bait's just not doing what it's supposed to. I've had
It won't
stuff.
move right? Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
like,
I've had stuff
it's
where
it's
because of
moving erratically where it's because it's manufactured to move a certain way, or
yeah,
it's engineered to move a certain way at a certain speed, and all of a sudden you're double or tripling that speed.
exactly. Yeah, because of the
It's gonna be
water
all fucked
speed.
up.
Yeah, for sure. Because I've seen it before, like where I've had a crankbait where you cast it out and that's just supposed to wiggle. Some of them will kind of like track back and forth a little bit and be more erratic or whatever. But I've had it like I've tried pulling it against the current before and it's like doing circles and loop de loops and shit. And you're just like, there's no
Oh,
fish out there barrel rolling, like
right,
the
right. And if you
smallmouth
were
is just
fishing
like,
high on a windy day, like if you're fishing shallow on a windy day, that's
yeah,
probably not gonna it's probably gonna do that shit too.
yeah,
If you're fishing the waves wrong with a shallow diving bait, I would
right.
assume.
Yeah. And I don't think the fish are interested in eating something that swims like that because it's so unnatural. But even if they are
Mhm.
trying to chase it, it's like some Top Gun maneuver where the smallmouth's coming at it, and all of a sudden it's just like shoot, like barrel rolling over it. It's like, oh shit,
What
that
the
fish
fuck
had some
was that?
that fish had some moves, bro. I tried to eat him. He juked me
So,
hard.
I I wanna jump back to the boat thing quick if we can, because it's so windy. You have a small boat. It's hard to get out in it because the sort of the things we talked about, like dipping, water
Yeah,
coming over, and shit like that. That that's scary. So different boats, different conditions, right?
for sure. Yeah, for
um,
sure.
but
Yeah, you got a 21-foot Ranger. You're not scared of most.
right,
You got a big old boat. There's not much you're gonna be nervous about.
yeah. And so you have to learn how to control that, like even kayaking, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, for
you got to
sure.
learn
You
how to
gotta.
control it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
does a GPS driven trolling motor know how to control that? Do you have any
Yep.
experience or insight on that?
So I don't have any experience or insight on that. Well, I have a little bit of insight. I don't have any experience. I've
Okay.
never used one of those before, but the GPS is smart enough that it'll get pushed off of its spot,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's smart enough to know where it's been pushed to and it will correct. So it might not be perfect, but you're not perfect behind it either. The only
Mm-hmm.
advantage that a person has over the GPS is that the GPS doesn't know anything happened until after it happened, where we can
Mm.
preemptively see like a big wave coming and be like, oh shit, and like kind of turn into it and kind of like
Right,
cut
right,
it
right.
off and help
Yeah.
our, the, the, tra- to
Point the
trajectory. I can't say that word.
shit. I can't now either.
I know, dude, it's hard when you think about it. Like when you just say it in conversation, it's fine, but then you're on a
Right.
podcast, you're trying to say it, and you're just like, the way I'm going, the way the boat's going. I'm just gonna
That
give up on that
way.
word. You know
But
how
yeah,
the
I get what
boats
you're
try and
saying.
go
Like
that way?
you can point the nose into the next wave, right? Like you can take the head on instead of taking a broadside or something like that. Like you can see it from 10 feet away and have enough time to correct your boat and take it
Yes. Yeah.
nose on
Exactly.
instead of taking it broadside, or
Yep.
however you want to look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot of. I shouldn't say a lot. I don't have any experience using like the GPS driven stuff, but I have heard other people talking about it and how nice it is to have like the spot lock and stuff, because the spot lock,
Hmm.
you could basically hit that and it'll keep you in an area, and it might let you drift like 10 feet to the left or the right or whatever, but it's going to
Hmm.
keep you in the same general location.
Hmm.
Like if you have to go net a fish or whatever for a buddy, or
Hmm.
you have to retie something, it's at least going to keep you like in the same general area.
Mm.
Where me, if something bites me off, I'm literally driving like 100 feet into the wind
Mm.
and then like putting on doing my best to keep it aimed that way,
Gotcha.
knowing that by the time I retie and it
Hmm.
pushes me back that 100 feet, I'll be close to where I was,
To where you were. Sure.
where it definitely would help. The spot lock sounds awesome. On a windy day, it's got to be awesome. Because I've talked about like the wind socks before.
Yeah.
The wind
That was
socks are
actually
like that.
something else I had on here.
Yeah, the wind socks are like that old school kind of way of controlling your drift and stopping you from moving too fast. But the new school, if you got that spot lock, you don't really have to mess around with that because it can slow down your drift,
Mhm.
but that might almost mess with the spot lock. This, it might not understand.
Oh,
I don't know.
right, that the
I
boat
don't
has
know for
more
sure.
drag than but is
Yeah.
that's a drift so the drift sock
Plus,
is something you drop in the water again, right?
yeah. So the drift sock is something you put. It kind of looks like an oversized one of those like wind socks that they have at the airports, so you
Oh,
know
yeah,
which way
yeah.
the wind's going.
Yep.
But they don't have them blaze orange; they're like blue,
Right,
But
because you drop them in the water.
yeah, yep,
Yeah,
you drop them in
yep.
the water, and it just slows down your drift. It's like a big parachute, and it basically just creates enough drag that it slows everything from moving too fast on a windy day.
Sure.
But that creates complications and stuff too. So ideally, I think a lot of people have gone away from that stuff because they have new technology like the spot lock and stuff.
Mm.
But
Mhm, mhm.
as far as cost effectiveness goes, if that's what you're trying to do, that windsock is definitely cheaper than a trolling motor with
Was
the
it GPS
spot
attached?
lock GPS setup. So,
Right, right, right.
um, but yeah, dude, it sounds really cool. Having that spot lock would be awesome.
Yeah.
Being on the GPS, being like, oh, stay in like the 10-foot contour and stuff, I think it probably gets thrown off the mark. But for the most part, you're still close to where you are, you know,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
I think you're probably not trying to move down the bank at a consistent clip most of the time, anyways.
mhm,
And you're kind of moving a little bit and making certain casts and stuff because
mhm.
casting also becomes difficult in the wind, especially when you're using
Oh,
bait casters.
oh, really?
Well, because the bait casters can backlash
Right.
if the bait doesn't keep going because it's just like a free spooling deal.
Okay.
And if your bait's not heavy enough and you throw it into the wind and the wind catches it, you'll backlash because
Right,
now the bait's not flying like it's supposed to. The bait stops,
right,
your spool keeps going because you don't catch it. Because
right.
if people out there don't know, when you have a bait caster and you throw it, you have to put your thumb on the spool to stop the line from going out before the bait hits the water. Like once it hits the water, if you stop it right then, you're fine. But if you keep your thumb off it, when the bait hits the water, that spool keeps running and it'll create like a rat's
This
nest
this
and all
because the
the
speed changes. It hits the water and it slows down from 10 miles an hour to 3 miles an hour,
yeah,
and the
yep,
spool's still doing 10 miles an hour.
exactly, yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
And then that line just spools off of it and creates a rat nest. So it gets all tangled up and stuff. And like, especially if you're using like spoons and stuff that catch the wind good, you go to
Mm,
huck one of those into the wind and just, you might rat's nest the moment you let go of that thing.
whew, that's a good
So
tip.
yeah, I mean, a good tip is like trying to use heavier baits, whatever you can get away with in
Mm,
general, like even
right.
heavier. If you have crankbaits that run the same depth and one weighs more than the other, probably try going with that heavier bait because that'll go through the wind better. You know,
Mm,
same thing with like a spinner bait. Probably don't do anything less than a half ounce. Maybe go bigger than that because
mm,
I know I was talking about being like, oh, ounce is a lot. That's for like just a straight jig. Like if you had like a 1 ounce spinner bait,
mhm,
that's a pretty heavy spinner bait, but spinner baits have blades on it and a lot of stuff that can catch the wind. So having
mm,
heavier, you could go with like a 1 ounce spinner bait, but I'd say like nothing less than a half ounce for sure. Half
right,
ounce, 3/8 ounce are pretty common spinner bait sizes. Ounce gets pretty big. So I guess it depends on where you're at. Using a
sure.
giant spinner bait might not be the best thing in Minnesota unless you're trying to catch like muskies or
Well, that's actually what I was gonna say. So, like, you're saying fish heavier, but doesn't fish heavier mean fish bigger baits? And then, like, how does that work out? Because sometimes if
yeah.
you're going out in whatever walleye chop means, and maybe you can answer that in this too, but like if you're
Oh
going
yeah.
out for eater size walleyes and you're trying, and you go out during the walleye chop, and I say that in quotes, it's like, well, how does that work then? Because if you're throwing too big, how are you gonna get eaters? Like,
Oh well, so if you're throwing too big, so like with walleyes and stuff, when you're throwing heavy jigs, you can still use the same size soft plastics and stuff.
no.
So that's kind of like a trick where you can use a
Oh,
heavier bait, but the bait's not really bigger when you're talking walleyes and stuff.
okay, okay.
So some of that stuff, depending on what it is, does get bigger. Crankbaits and stuff when you get 1 ounces
Mhm.
and spinner baits get bigger and stuff. But those you're talking bass most of the time.
Okay.
You're not catching walleyes on the spinner bait for the most part. It happens, but that's not what they're made for.
Right, right, right.
And the same thing with like crankbaits and stuff. But on those days when the fish are more aggressive, sometimes they'll hit those bigger baits anyways. So you can get away with it.
Because it's
Um,
windy. Yep. Because that's
yeah,
actually what I found out is like when it's windy, it oxygenates the water and then there's more oxygen and the fish get all fucking fired up. So
yeah, they're just
that's
oh
exactly
yeah,
what
bro.
you're pointing out. You're saying like
Yeah,
they get fucking turbo mode.
right. Yeah, you can definitely have like a way more productive. I've heard plenty of pros like with walleye and bass talking about how they go out and fish a spot of the lake where like the wind's hitting and
Mhm.
they're just killing them like fish after fish after fish all day. Fish the same spot the next day when it's calm and they don't get dick. Like there's not even a fish there. The
There's
water's
even
clear.
fish
They
there.
can see. Yeah, the water's clear. They can see down like the exact same spot they were fishing yesterday. Doesn't even have a
Okay.
fish in it. They can't see anything. It
Sure,
might have
sure.
a fish in it that are hiding in the weeds or whatever, but that's what they're doing now. You got to slow it down and try to find them. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
man, when you're
what do you mean
throwing
with
that big
the
stuff, I was
yeah.
just gonna say, like, be
Yep,
prepared.
that's exactly. Okay.
When you're throwing that big stuff, be ready. Don't don't tie on your favorite spinnerbait thinking that that's all it's gonna be. Like if you're okay with losing it because a muskie comes and grabs it, cool.
Mm,
But maybe throw on a leader, at least like a leader material. You can get like clear fluorocarbon leader material
okay.
and tie that on where it's
Mhm.
more abrasion resistant and it still keeps it kind of clear. And you
Right.
can get heavier stuff and just put a couple of feet, so it gives you a better odds of not losing it. But you might have, if you're fishing a lake with muskies, you might have a muskie come and grab that stuff. If anybody out there knows what a Rapala DT10 is, crankbait that's like 2.5 inches long, I've had muskies bite that thing.
Mm.
It's just like it happens sometimes, and that one,
Sure.
I have that lure back. It's got a lot of stories to tell, a lot of teeth marks, but that one I cast it out and I like had a fish and I was like, this feels like a good fish. And it didn't even know that it bit the bait. By the time I got it up to the water, I saw it was a muskie and it like looked right at me. And once it realized that he was hooked, he took off swimming. Once he seen me, like just took off fast.
Oh,
But I didn't
weird.
even know what to do after that. I freaked out because the bait was gone. There was just line going into his mouth. And I'm like, oh, like if I
Oh, shit.
if I lift this up and then eventually like I got him to the surface after like letting him run for a while and he just opened up his mouth and the bait just came out. I didn't even think I had him hooked. He just didn't want to give up the fish.
Just didn't wanna give up what he ate.
Yeah, he's just
Whoa,
like,
what
oh,
the
I
fuck,
got it.
dude?
Yeah, he's like, oh, I caught it. I'm not giving it up. And then
That's
like right
so
before I
weird.
landed him, he just gave it back. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's
So
so
just be
weird.
prepared that it might happen, because everything's more aggressive. You might get a muskie trying to bite it
Mm,
or a
mhm,
pike
right.
are in almost every lake in
So
Minnesota.
throwing the
So
bigger throwing a bigger weight. Well, you even said though, if you throw a bigger weight for the walleyes, like it might not get in the way. Like how
yeah,
does
because you can go with a heavier jig head. If you go
mhm.
up to like a 3/8 ounce jig head, it's still the same hook shank for the most part. It's just like the ball of the head is bigger,
Oh,
so you can still put the same soft plastic on, and you'll
right.
be kind of working it faster.
Yeah,
It's going to have a faster fall rate. There's nothing you can do about that, but
right.
that's what you got to do if you want to feel it. If you're out
Gotcha.
there casting around 1/8 ounce in heavy winds, you just can't feel it. You might
Is
catch a
that
fish, but it's all luck.
oh, sure, of course. Yeah. Uh, so is a fluke what you're talking about? Like is a fluke bait kind of the soft plastic you're talking about?
Oh, yeah, like a fluke is like it looks like a minnow and it has a straight tail. It's not like a
Yeah.
swim bait. You
Yeah.
you give it all the action.
So I heard last year actually watching the Bass Elite, they were like, "Whoa, fluke fishing in this wind, that's pretty crazy." And I was like, "I have no fucking clue what they're saying." And I
If
wanted to bring that up now to be like, "Wait, is that what you're talking about now with the walleyes or
well, so if you're using a fluke and you're putting it on a jig head, you can pretty much fish that anywhere. But I'm guessing if they were saying that it was crazy that they were doing it weightless, because a lot of people will fish a weightless fluke. That's my favorite thing to fish. I love fishing a
Oh,
weightless fluke.
okay.
So you can get flukes, there's super flukes and stuff. So they range from like 4 to like, I don't know, I think some of the big ones are probably like 8-9 inches long.
Jeez.
And then you put a hook in it, and all you do is just like pop it a couple of times, and then you let it die. And it's like a
Mm,
dying minnow. It'll kind of
mm,
like swim and then fall. And then a lot of times they'll hit it on the fall.
mm-hmm.
If you don't have any weight and you're trying to do that in like super windy conditions, that would be hard, real hard,
Right.
especially if the wind's blowing it in. But depending on where
Sure.
you're fishing, if
Mm-hmm.
your graphs, if you can read your graphs or you have side imaging and you know that you can see like a bait ball and you
Mm-hmm.
figure that there's fish there and it's getting
Oh,
blown and you're fishing like a dying minnow or whatever,
sure,
you could
sure.
get away with it. It's just going to be hard.
It's gonna be hard to
So
get the
that's
damn
probably why
fluke
they're
out
just like,
into the bait
yeah. And
into the bait ball or whatever.
right. And for the most part, you're fishing that on like a spinning rig because you can cast the lighter baits a lot easier with a spinning reel.
Oh, okay.
So they're probably hucking it with that thing because
Okay.
I would do that. That's how I would fish it.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, that would be kind of hard to do. Everybody says, like basically like those baits are out when it's windy. You can't do that.
Right. Just don't do that.
And then the pros are just like, watch me,
I'm gonna throw the fuck out of this thing. I couldn't
yeah,
imagine doing that with all of the casts that they have to do in a day. Like, oh my god,
yeah.
your whole back is gonna be sore by the end of the damn day.
Oh, dude, yeah. Just the waves in general. I know I've been out there when it's super windy and the waves are like moving you around. You come in, you're just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, my back is so tense because you just been like constantly like working these muscles in a weird way.
Right. That's what I
Or you
said.
get
Like
that,
that's what I started out with, like working out. Like you watch these
yeah.
guys on out there on their boats in the front working the fucking trolling motor and like riding the wave, like literally riding the waves with the
Oh yeah,
boat.
dude.
Like
They're like a
holy
bull
fuck, dude.
or like riding a horse. You're kind of trying to
Yeah,
move
try
with it,
not to get bucked off.
dude. It gets so it's so constant over and over and over that a lot of times on a really windy day, it's like a phantom wave syndrome where you get
Oh,
back to
sure.
the dock, you get off, you're
Yep.
on flat land, but you still feel like you're moving.
Right.
You're just
Yes.
like, oh, I just need to go sit down.
That is crazy. Another thing,
Yeah.
if it's a really windy day, get yourself some of those motion sickness pills.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you can ride that out, if you can get out
If
there on
you
a day
have
that
trouble
windy and
with
you can fish
yeah,
it,
if you have
hey.
trouble with motion, definitely. The smaller waves seem to not fuck with people so much, but
Mhm.
like it depends on where you're at. Sometimes the waves are like tighter, even when it's like really. If the body of water is smaller, you'll still get big waves, but they're like closer together.
Oh,
So that
sure.
constantly like tight wiggling is a little bit better. Like the Great Lakes, it's like these big swooping motions, and that
Right.
seems to be what gets people sick. Like that's what the ocean has
Right.
in
Yeah.
extremes.
Right. Yep. That's what's
So
happening on the St. Lawrence for the elites because it's a feed. It's a feed in the
yeah,
ocean. It feeds to the ocean, I should say. When the walleye chop thing, what does that mean? That I have to
walleye,
ask that before we wrap this up.
yeah, walleye chop is just like the wind itself is creating like the little waves on the surface.
Oh,
So a walleye chop is like where you have the little like a decent, you know,
like
like not a
the
hardcore wind, but like
mhm.
wind
To break up the
enough
water
to
or to break up the
yeah.
sunlight, basically,
Yep,
right? To
yep.
make the
So
water darker, I guess?
yeah, walleye chop is like ideal because it's like enough wind to get things moving, but not enough that it makes things hard to fish.
Oh,
So that's
okay.
the walleye chop is like the perfect amount of wind is basically what it's referring
That's
to.
what it means.
Yeah, the
It's the
walleye
amount of wind that you want to break the surface so that your
yes,
line is disguised and your bait has a little bit more camouflage on it.
exactly. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so it's used to describe the wind, like
Mhm.
that's basically what it is talking about, but the walleye chop itself, what they're talking about is the waves.
Gotcha. You're right.
that's the
Right.
chop. Like, oh, there's some nice chop out here, or like when you're
Gotcha.
looking at the waves, oh, it's kind of choppy out here. It's not glass, it's choppy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, I was gonna say two things. One,
Yep.
definitely the wind's your friends. I talked about other muskies and stuff, just a little bit ago, but my first muskie ever came off the dock on a crazy windy day where I didn't
Oh.
think we'd catch shit, and it was just randomly. I remember it like it was yesterday, dude. I will
I bet you
never
do.
forget it. I had an old school 16-foot Lund boat, and it
Oh
had
yeah.
rained
The old
heavy like that
the
week.
old red Lund with the
Yeah,
green
yeah,
interior.
yep. And it had rained heavy that week, and my boat regularly did not have like it sat in the water, but it didn't have like a boat lift or anything. We would just tie it to everything,
Mm.
and it stayed in place, but it would like fill up with water, and then the waves would start coming over it and stuff. So
Really?
regularly we'd come up, and it's like the boat's just underwater. So like, oh, cool, neat. So
All right.
the boat's like underneath the water. The water is all stirred up, like you can't see through it at all, and that's a super clear water
A
lake.
clear lake that just went mucky.
Yeah, but I know that normally there's like muskies, or there used to be. Things have changed, but there used to be like a couple of muskies that would always be underneath that dock, just kind of
Hmm.
waiting there. And I don't know what changed, but the muskies don't sit there anymore. So like,
Mm-hmm.
just there's a lesson for everybody. Like, things
Right.
change in lakes. Like, keep it. They
Right.
won't always be the same. When we
Right.
started going up there was muskies always underneath that dock, and now there's not. I haven't seen a muskie off the dock in a long time.
Sure.
But that time I cast it out, it was a Rapala Super Shad Rap. It was the red on the head, white in the back.
Yeah.
Casted it out, pulled that thing in like twice, and that's a floating bait. So it kind of like went down, down, and then floated to the surface and sat there. And I saw
Mm-hmm.
the muskie slowly come out. And I'm like, oh shit.
Oh
And then I
shit.
kind of froze because
Even
I'm
in the
like, I
mucky
don't know.
water, you could still see it.
Well, because he came so close to the surface.
Mm.
I couldn't see him if he would have been down, but he came up
Right.
so close to the
Right.
surface, and I kind of froze. I was like, I don't know what to do about this. And then he slowly came up like a dog trying to take a treat. When you tell him gentle, it's just
Uh-huh.
like, won't, and just grabbed onto it super gently.
What the fuck,
And I
dude?
remember audibly just going, he ate it. And then setting the hook and then fighting, like it ran underneath the dock, and I'm trying to like get it
Oh
under,
God.
like stop it from like wrapping around everything, but it did. And luckily I had, like I had been trying for muskies, so I
Mm-hmm.
had the line and everything, but I was never successful,
Right.
and
Right.
ended up landing that fish, and it was like 42 inches, but
Hell yeah.
I never caught a fish like that before, and it was just like mind boggling. And even though I had tried many, many times and saw these fish
Mm-hmm.
off the dock over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over, they were never interested in a bait until the water got stirred up and the wind
Mm.
was blowing directly at the dock. And then
Mm-hmm.
it just turned that fish on to eat it, even though I wasn't doing much with the bait. The
Sure.
fish was just like, well, I'll eat it. It just kind of swam up and just like, I'll give
Just
it a
gave it
shot.
like, cool. Just sitting there.
Speaking of weird food, he's just like, this red and white thing is weird. I'll try it. Yeah. But
Well, yeah, before we transition into the weird food, did you have anything else you wanted to
yeah, I
let the
got
people know?
I got one more thing, and it is I kind of just jotted down a note.
Mm-hmm.
I even forgot what I was trying not to forget.
Yeah, that'll
The
happen. That's why you take notes.
safety, guys.
Oh.
Don't forget, when it's
Mm-hmm.
windy, shit can get hectic.
Yes. Very
And
good point.
yeah, I'm a super strong swimmer. I'm just
Yep.
super strong. Just pause there. I'm super
I'm
strong. And then just be like, yeah, one more thing I don't want anybody to forget. Safety first. I'm super strong. Just no. But I'm a super strong swimmer. I always wear a life jacket when it's like crazy windy when we're driving. When you're fishing, nah, like the boat's not moving that fast. If you fall out, it's not really going to take off on you, depending on what you're doing or whatever.
Right.
But when you're driving, you don't know what's going to happen with those waves.
Right.
The way to hit the waves is at an angle. Like, it depends on what kind of water, again, you're dealing with. If it's like a
Mm-hmm.
smaller body of water, and even if the waves are big, if they're close together when you're going fast, it just kind of, you can go pop, 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 right over the top of them.
Yep.
If your boat's long enough,
Right.
like
You can cut
if
through
you're
them, kind of.
bridging that gap and you're just
Right.
on the
There you
tops
go.
of the waves,
Yep.
you're fine. But if
Yep.
it's a real big one and it's going up and down, you want to go at an angle. Don't go straight at them, because when you're going straight at them, you're hitting that one, you're coming up, and then you're like nose diving into the next one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem. On like bass boats, if you're going too fast and you're hitting those waves, if you catch one and get a little bit like the nose comes up high, that shit can catch the wind. And so you go on YouTube, you can find videos of this stuff.
Oh
That'll catch
God.
the wind and that thing will just take off into the sky.
What?
And then you and your like a racing boat, yeah, just
Holy shit.
if you get the nose up too high and you're going too fast with the wind blowing underneath it, if the gust hits you,
Yep.
like,
I
because
suppose. Because you got
if
to
the
think
wind's,
what you're doing 50 and the gust is doing 30.
yeah, and then you catch underneath that thing, you
It's
just
like
have
a
this
kite, dude.
giant, yeah, you have this giant kite takes off like one of those
Holy
uh
shit.
tubes pulling behind the boat, and it gets that airborne.
Right.
But there's that. The life jacket, if you go overboard, you never know. If you end up going overboard because you hit a wave wrong or whatever,
Yeah.
most of the time you're probably going to smack something on the way out.
Right.
You might screw up your leg, your arm. Like, you're not going to be wanting to tread water. Don't be tough
Right.
about
Or
it.
even
Don't
hit
be
your
like, oh,
head.
I could
Be
swim.
fucking
Yeah, but
disoriented for a little
yeah,
while.
exactly. If you hit your head, you might not even be able to swim.
Right.
You get knocked out. Those life jackets are designed to like roll you over so you float face up.
Right. Right.
And I
Good
mean,
point, dude. Such a good
big
point.
points. And the other one is always wear that lanyard. If you have
Oh
a
God.
motorized boat, make sure that thing
Mm-hmm.
is hooked up to your life jacket, because if you fall off or you go flying, the boat doesn't stop unless you have
Nope.
that kill switch pulled.
Oh my
And
God.
I
You
just
showed me
saw,
videos of that shit.
dude, I just saw a clip with the dumbest kids in the world, where one of them, they're on like a wakeboard boat, and one of them's
Oh
pulling a
God.
wakeboarder, and the other one has like the GoPro set up, and he's like, "Are you ready?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, we're good." And he grabs his like wake surfing thing
Oh yeah.
and
Wake
goes
surf
back and
shit.
tries to like surf the wake. Well,
Yep.
he was the driver. There's nobody else on board. He falls off. The guy that was on the wakeboard falls off trying to get back on, and now they're both in the water and the boat's just driving.
Just what the fuck?
Yeah, they're idiots, because they're just like,
That's
"Oh,
the
we're
dumbest
good.
shit.
We won't fall." And it's just like,
Right.
well, when the pressure's on, you
Right.
both ate shit. Now your boat's just driving, and
Right.
it won't stop unless somebody else like is able to intercept it, or it runs ashore,
Or it
or
runs into something
runs
else.
into somebody else or something
Yeah.
else. Yeah, it's
What the hell, dude?
wear that lanyard. You got to shut it off. If you fall and you wipe out, I mean,
Yep.
especially if you're
Yep.
falling in, if it kills it, the prop stops spinning. If you fall in the wrong spot, you go like underneath that boat. That's not going to be pretty.
No. Yeah.
Anyways,
Safety
safety
first on
first.
windy days, man. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point, though. It's a bleak way to end, but a good ass thing that I didn't even think of. I
Yeah.
had
I'm not
not
trying to
written
scare
down, but I love
anybody.
making those points. Like, you gotta make sure to like do that. Don't be stupid. Like, "Well, I don't need
Yeah.
this
And
ugly vest. I got this
right.
designer swimsuit and a fucking six pack."
Yeah.
I don't.
And also, like, another thing that I did want to say that I forgot to say is, when it is windy like that, if you don't have means of fishing the windy side of the lake, don't get out of the wind, man. There's no point. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they do say that the windy side is more productive and the fish will set up over there, but the fish on the other side of the lake are not swimming all the way to the other side of
Oh,
the lake to hit that.
right.
They're
Right.
still on that side of the lake. They're just not as active. You can still catch them.
Right. Yeah.
So
Good
just go
point.
work, just slow things down and fish the not windy side of the lake.
Yeah.
You
Or
don't have
fish
to.
will congregate to the windy side because that's where the food is. But like on a decent sized lake, every single fish ain't swimming over there. That's just not how it works.
Right. Yeah.
It's a
They
good
they
point.
might they might know that the current's going that way, but then they look where the current's going and it's just the fucking abyss. They have no idea what the other side of the lake's like. They've never been
Right,
over
right,
there,
right.
and they're
So they
just like,
won't leave
I'm
they're not gonna leave their comfort zone.
Yeah, I'm not leaving. I'll wait for the wind to shift. They're not stupid. They know what it's like. There's fish that are just like us out there. I
Mhm.
mean, obviously they don't think as well, but they're just like, I don't need to eat today. Or like I'll chase down the
Mhm.
food a different way. The wind
Right.
will shift.
Right.
Eventually it'll come back my way.
It'll come back.
I don't need to risk swimming in open water and getting chomped.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, man. Whoa. That was fucking awesome. We now got to get into the ads and do the second half after the ads, where the second half is going to be. I don't know why I'm talking so quietly. That was fucking, I don't know. Anyways, let's get into the random take. Damn it. We're going to talk about weird food we've eaten, weird food that we want to eat. I just want to
Yeah.
talk about weird food because I've been watching some shit on the internet and it just sparked that in my brain. And I was like, all right, I'm bringing it to the podcast. So we're going to flip over to that now.